The light rain in Washington reflected Tom Homan's somber mood as he reviewed the documents on his solid oak desk. The invitation to the Global Security Summit in Geneva was there, but that wasn't what held his attention. It was the list of participants. Ibrahim Traoré, he muttered, tapping his finger on the name. The boy soldier who thinks he can play president. His assistant Sarah entered with coffee. Sir, the State Department confirmed. He'll be there. First time a Burkina Faso leader attends in 15 years. Homan smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the expression of a predator who had just spotted prey. Perfect. Time to show the world what happens when amateurs try to sit at the adults' table. In his 30 years of career, Homan had built a reputation as America's toughest negotiator. He didn't just defend borders, he demolished opponents with words as sharp as barbed wire. And now this 36-year-old African captain who had taken power, through a coup, wanted to play diplomacy. Schedule a press conference for when I return, he ordered. This will be educational. Meanwhile, 5,000 miles away in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré was also preparing. But his preparation was different. While Homan sharpened his rhetorical weapons, Traoré visited a school in Dori, a city devastated by terrorist attacks. Mr. President, said little Aminata, only 8 years old, why do other countries think we can't take care of ourselves? Traoré knelt to her height, because sometimes, Aminata, when you've been strong for too long, you forget that others can be strong too. But we'll show them not with anger, but with dignity. He didn't know that in a few days these words would echo around the world. Tom Homan's morning began at 5 a.m. in his mansion in Arlington, Virginia. The home gym, the protein shake, the meticulously ironed suit, everything in his life was control and precision. On the wall, photos with 3 presidents, medals of honor, newspaper clippings praising his iron fist on immigration policy. Another day, another battle, he said to his reflection while adjusting his red tie. The color wasn't random. Psychology of Intimidation. Chapter 1. His driver Marcus, a Vietnam veteran, waited outside. Geneva, Sir, Geneva. Time to teach these third world leaders where they belong. Marcus said nothing, but something in his eyes suggested disagreement. He had seen too much war to believe in the glory of humiliation. Across the Atlantic, Ibrahim Traoré's morning was radically different. No mansion, no gym. He woke up in the modest presidential palace in Ouagadougou, a building that still bore bullet marks from past coups. His breakfast, the same corn porridge the soldiers ate. Sir, his advisor Musa entered worried. Intelligence confirms Homan plans to confront you publicly. Perhaps we should reconsider. No, Traoré interrupted, putting on his military uniform. Not for intimidation, but because it was what he had. If he wants a confrontation, he'll have a lesson. He walked to the window, observing the city awakening, street vendors setting up their stalls, children walking to school, life persisting despite everything. This was what he was defending, not his ego, but the dignity of 21 million Burkinabés. Musa, do you remember what my grandmother used to say? Which of her sayings? Sir, she had many. When the elephant mocks the ant's size, it forgets that the ant can carry 50 times its own weight. Musa smiled. She was a wise woman. She was, and she survived French colonization, 5 coups and 3 famines. If she could do that with dignity, I can survive Tom Homan. Neither man knew that in 72 hours their destinies would intertwine in a way that would forever change how the world saw power and leadership. American Airlines Flight 110 cruised at 40,000 feet over the Atlantic. In first class, Tom Homan reviewed his ammunition statistics about Burkina Faso that he would use as weapons. Poverty rate 41%, literacy 36%. Global Terrorism Index 4th most affected country. Perfect, he murmured, highlighting key numbers. Each statistic was a bullet he would fire at Traoré's credibility. Next to him, a young journalist, Lisa Chen from the Washington Post, tried to start a conversation. To show the world that feel-good policies don't replace real security, these African leaders think they can expel Western forces and handle terrorism alone. We'll see how that works when reality hits. Lisa took notes, but something in Homan's arrogance bothered her. Don't you think there's value in nations seeking sovereignty? Homan laughed a dry sound like breaking branches. Sovereignty. They can't even feed their people. Sovereignty is a luxury for those who can afford it. Hours behind in a modest Air Burkina flight, Ibrahim Traoré traveled in economy class, not for show, but because every saved franc mattered to his country. Around him, his delegation. Just 3 people compared to Homan's 15. A flight attendant, recognizing him, whispered, "Mr. President, we have a seat in business class if you prefer." "No, thank you. I'm fine here. But perhaps you could give that meal to someone who needs it more." In the seat behind, an old woman overheard the conversation. She leaned forward. "You're going to face the Americans, aren't you?" "Yes, grandmother. My son died fighting for France in their war. They promised us equality. We're still waiting." She grabbed his hand with surprising strength. "Don't let them humiliate us again." Traoré squeezed her hand back. "I promise." It was a promise he intended to keep, though he still didn't know exactly how. As the plane flew over the Sahara, he closed his eyes and remembered his military training. Sometimes the best strategy isn't to attack where the enemy is strongest, but where they least expect. The Palais des Nations in Geneva gleamed under the Swiss morning sun. Flags from 193 nations fluttered in the alpine breeze, each representing a different vision of the world. Security was tight. The Global Security Summit brought together some of the most powerful and controversial leaders on the planet. Tom Homan arrived in a convoy of 3 black SUVs. He emerged from the vehicle like a general inspecting troops, every movement calculated to project power. The cameras loved him, the strongman of American security, the defender of borders. Mr. Homan, journalists shouted. "What's your message for the summit? Security isn't negotiable." He responded, not slowing his pace. "Some here, we'll learn that today." An hour later, a single, modest van arrived. Ibrahim Traoré stepped out, his uniform simple but impeccable. No fanfare, no grand gestures, but something in his bearing. Perhaps the way he looked directly at each person, perhaps the quiet confidence in his walk, made the cameras turn. "President Traoré, how do you respond to critics who say Burkina Faso is failing without Western military support?" He stopped, considered the question. "We're not failing. We're learning to walk on our own. Sometimes you stumble, but that's how you grow stronger." Inside the palace, the atmosphere was electric. Diplomats whispered in corners. Alliances were negotiated over coffee, and everyone waited for the plenary session where Homan and Traoré would inevitably clash. Sarah found Homan in the American delegation room. "Sir, I've done more research. On Traoré, you should know he's not what he seems. Top of his military class, speaks 5 languages, studied guerrilla tactics, and I don't care if he speaks 10 languages." Homan cut her off. "He's still a boy playing dress-up in a uniform. Set up the cameras. I want every angle when I expose him." In another wing of the building, Traoré sat alone in a small room reading, not briefings or statistics, but a worn book of African poetry. Musa entered, worried. "Sir, our intelligence says Homan plans to humiliate you in the terrorism panel. He has statistics, graphs, everything prepared to make us look incompetent." Traoré closed the book gently. "Musa, do you know the difference between a lion and a hyena, sir? The lion doesn't need to prove he's a lion. He simply is. Let Homan bring his numbers. I'll bring the truth." The clock showed 2 p.m. In 1 hour, the panel Terrorism and Sovereignty, Can Africa Secure Itself? Would begin. The moderator, a veteran Swiss diplomat, was already sweating. He knew what was coming. The stage was set. The world was watching, and two men from opposite sides of the world were about to collide in a battle where words would be the only weapons. But words, as history shows, can sometimes change everything. The conference room was packed, 300 delegates, dozens of cameras, and a palpable tension that made the air feel electric. The panel table was simple: 5 chairs, 5 microphones, 5 glasses of water. But everyone knew this was an arena, and blood would be spilled, even if only metaphorically. Tom Homan entered first, shaking hands with calculated firmness, his smile never reaching his eyes. He chose the center seat without asking, a power move that didn't go unnoticed. Ibrahim Traoré entered quietly, nodded respectfully to everyone, and took a seat at the end. Some interpreted it as weakness. Others who knew military strategy recognized it as choosing the high ground. The moderator, Dr. Hans Muller, began with diplomatic pleasantries that fooled no one. Gentlemen, we're here to discuss security, cooperation in Africa. Mr. Homan, perhaps you'd like to start. Homan didn't need a second invitation. He stood, another power move, and clicked his remote. The screen filled with graphs. Let's talk reality, not dreams, he began, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Burkina Faso, 600% increase. In terrorist attacks since Western forces were expelled. 2 million internally displaced. A government that took power through a coup, talking about sovereignty. He turned to Traoré, eyes cold as winter. President Traoré, with all due respect, which isn't much. How can you sit here and claim your country doesn't need help when your people are dying? Gasps echoed through the room. This wasn't diplomacy. It was a public execution. Traoré didn't flinch. He took a sip of water. Slowly, deliberately. When he spoke, his voice was calm as a lake at dawn. Mr. Homan, you speak of numbers. Let me share one. 60, that's how many years France occupied my country. 500,000, that's how many of our men died fighting their wars. 0. That's how many times they asked if we wanted to fight. Ancient history, Homan interrupted. I'm talking about now. Your people are suffering now, yes they are, Traoré agreed, standing slowly. But suffering isn't new to us. What's new is that we're choosing our own path to heal. Homan smelled blood. Time for the kill. Choosing you took power by force. You're not elected. You're not legitimate. You're just another African strongman playing revolutionary while your country burns. The room held its breath. Cameras zoomed in. This was the moment. Traoré walked to the screen past Homan, who stepped aside with a smirk. The young president touched the screen, showing the statistics almost gently. You know what these numbers don't show, Mr. Homan? They don't show the mother in Djibo who started a cooperative to feed 50 families. They don't show the students in Kaya who patrol their own schools at night. They don't show the 1,000 communities that are surviving not because of foreign soldiers, but despite them. Pretty stories don't stop bullets. Homan shot back. No, Traoré agreed, turning to face him. But neither does arrogance. The tension was unbearable. Muller tried to intervene. Gentlemen, perhaps we should... I'm not finished. Homan cut him off, his face reddening. You want to talk about arrogance. You expelled trained military forces and replaced them with what? Farmers with AK-47s. You're not a leader. You're a gambler betting your people's lives on your ego. That's when it happened. The moment that would be replayed millions of times. Traoré smiled, not mockingly, but with something almost like pity. Mr. Homan, he said, his voice carrying across the silent room, you've spent so much time building walls. You've forgotten that bridges are what make nations strong. He paused, let the words sink in, then delivered the line that would change everything. But I understand. When your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, even the hands reaching out for help. The silence that followed was deafening. Tom Homan's face went through a spectrum of emotions: shock, anger, confusion, and something else. Recognition for the first time. In his career, he had no immediate response. Traoré continued, his voice gaining strength but never volume. You see statistics. I see people. You see failure. I see resilience. You see a problem to be solved by force. I see a nation learning to solve its own problems. He walked back to his seat, each step measured. Mr. Homan, you asked how I can sit here. I sit here because my people sent me not through an election, true, but through their trust that someone finally would stand up and say, enough. Enough of being told we're not capable. Enough of solutions designed in offices 10,000 miles away. Enough of being the child who never grows up in the world's eyes. Lisa Chen, the journalist from the Washington Post, was typing furiously. This wasn't what anyone expected. The boy soldier was teaching the master a lesson in dignity. Homan finally found his voice, but it lacked its earlier edge. Pretty words don't change facts. Your country is mine. Traoré interrupted softly, with all its problems, all its pain, all its hope. Can you say the same about yours? When was the last time you walked among the people you claim to protect, Mr. Homan? When did you last ask them what they need rather than telling them what they should fear? The camera caught it the moment Homan's armor cracked. For a split second, his eyes showed something human. Doubt, reflection, but it was gone, quickly replaced by familiar hardness. This is exactly the naive thinking that, is it naive to believe in your people's strength? Traoré asked. Is it naive to think that those who live with a problem might understand it better than those who study it from afar? If that's naive, then yes, I am naive, but I'd rather be naive with hope than wise with cynicism. Dr. Miller sensed an opportunity to regain control. Perhaps we could hear from other panelists, but the room wasn't interested in other panelists. Everyone was watching the two men who had become symbols of something larger, old power versus new possibility, control versus trust, fear versus hope. Homan made one last attempt. When your experiment fails, and it will fail, and your people, don't pay the price. Remember this moment. Remember choosing pride over help. Traoré stood again, and this time he looked not at Homan, but at the cameras, at the world watching. I will remember this moment, he said. I'll remember the day I chose to believe in my people rather than fear them. I'll remember choosing to build rather than to wall off. And yes, we might fail. But if we do, we'll fail trying to stand, not kneeling. He turned to Homan one last time. You asked how I can sit here. I ask you, how can you sit there with all your power, all your resources, and see only threats where you could see partners? The applause started slowly, one person then another, then spreading through the room like wildfire. Not everyone. Some sat in uncomfortable silence, but enough to show that something had shifted. Homan gathered his papers, his movements sharp, angry. But as he passed Traoré, he stopped. For a moment they stood face to face, the older man looking down at the younger. You have no idea what you're playing with, he said quietly. Meant only for Traoré's ears. Neither did David Traoré reply, just as quietly. But Goliath fell anyway. Within minutes the clip was everywhere. Bridges, not walls, began trending globally. The phrase, when your only tool is a hammer everything, looks like a nail, became the most shared quote of the day. News networks scrambled to analyze what had just happened. In Washington, Tom Homan's phone wouldn't stop ringing. His staff watched nervously as he sat in his hotel room staring at his phone as notification after notification popped up. Sir Sarah ventured carefully. Should we prepare a statement? Get out, he said quietly. It wasn't angry, just tired. Everyone just get out. Alone. Homan watched the replay on CNN. The anchor Anderson Cooper was dissecting the moment. What we witnessed wasn't just a diplomatic exchange, but a generational shift in how we discuss global leadership. He changed to Fox News, usually friendly territory. But even there, Homan seemed unprepared for Traoré's philosophical approach. The young leader turned what should have been a policy debate into a moral examination. His phone rang. The caller ID showed the White House, Tom the Chief. Of Staff's voice was carefully neutral. The president wants to know if you need support. Support? Homan laughed bitterly. For what? Getting lectured. By a coup leader for doing your job, though perhaps a different approach next time. There won't be a next time, Homan said and hung up. Meanwhile, in his modest hotel room, Traoré sat with his small team watching the same coverage with very different emotions. "Sir, you're trending in 47 countries," Moussa exclaimed. "The African Union chairman just called to congratulate you. The French president wants a meeting. Everyone wants to talk to you." But Traoré wasn't celebrating. He was reading messages from home. One caught his eye from a teacher in Ouagadougou. "Mr. President, my students watched you today. For the first time they saw an African leader who didn't apologize for being African. Thank you. This is the only review that matters," he said quietly. Sir Moussa asked. All of this, Traoré gestured at the screens, "means nothing if it doesn't translate to hope for our people. Tomorrow they'll still wake up to the same challenges. We gave them a moment of pride today. Now we owe them a lifetime of progress." His phone rang. The caller ID was unexpected. Tom Homan. Moussa's eyes widened. "Sir, you don't have to," Traoré answered. "Mr. Homan," there was a long pause. "Then that thing you said about hammers and nails. Where'd you learn that my grandmother, she was a blacksmith's daughter? She used to say it when the French administrators would try to solve every problem with force." Another pause. I've been thinking." "That's good, Mr. Homan. Thinking is always good. Don't patronize me." Homan snapped, then caught himself. "Sorry, look, I still think you're wrong. But maybe I've been looking at this with only one lens." "We all do that sometimes," Traoré said gently. "The question is whether we're willing to try on different glasses." "Is that another grandmother saying no?" Traoré smiled. "That one's mine." They talked for 10 more minutes, not as adversaries, not as friends, but as two men beginning to see each other as human. It wasn't a solution to all the world's problems, but it was a start. When they hung up, both men stared at their phones, surprised by what had just happened. Change, real change, often begins in the most unexpected moments. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. The video had been viewed 50 million times. Op-eds flooded major newspapers. University professors incorporated the exchange into their lectures. But more importantly, something was shifting in the real world. In Burkina Faso, the effect was immediate. Communities that had been hesitant about the government's self-reliance policies suddenly felt empowered. In Kaya, a group of women who had been waiting for international aid to rebuild their market decided to start on their own. "If our president can stand up to America," one said, mixing concrete, "we can stand up to our problems." In Djibo, young men who had been considering joining extremist groups for money watched their president defend their dignity on the world stage. Several changed their minds, joining local defense committees instead. But the impact wasn't limited. To Burkina Faso, in Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal, and beyond, young Africans shared the clip with a single word. Finally, the surprise was the reaction in America. In a Detroit community center, a group of veterans watched the exchange. "Kids got a point," said Marcus Williams, who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan. "We went there to help, but did we ever ask what help they wanted?" In a Texas border town, Maria Gonzalez, who had supported Homan's tough stance, found herself reconsidering. Maybe building bridges is harder than walls, but it lasts longer. Tom Homan himself was experiencing something unprecedented doubt. Back in Washington, he sat in his office, the same one where this journey began. But everything looked different now. Sarah knocked and entered. "Sir, you have the Homeland Security meeting in 10 minutes. Cancel it." "Sir, cancel everything." But today he was reading something on his computer articles about Burkina Faso, but not the statistics he'd weaponized. Stories about people, communities, struggles, and small victories. "Sarah, how long have you worked for me?" 7 years, sir. In 7 years have I ever asked you about your family, your dreams, why you come to work every day? Sarah was stunned. "No, sir." "Why not?" I suppose you were focused on the mission, Homan repeated. And what is the mission, Traoré? She sensed this wasn't rhetorical. To keep America safe. Safe from what, from whom? From that young man who just wants his people to have dignity. He turned to face her. I've spent 30 years building walls, Sarah. Real ones and metaphorical ones. And yesterday a 36-year-old soldier asked me a simple question. What if we built bridges instead? Sir, are you feeling all right? Homan almost smiled. No, and that might be the healthiest thing that's happened to me in years. Meanwhile, Traoré was dealing with his own challenges. The attention was overwhelming, but he was determined not to let it distract from the work. Musa, I want a report on every community self-help initiative in the country. If we're going to talk about self-reliance, we need to support those already practicing it. Sir, the international offers are pouring in. Investment proposals, partnership requests, evaluate each one. But the criteria is simple. Do they see us as partners or as projects? We'll work with those who respect us as equals. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. This is Tom Homan. Would you be willing to continue our conversation? I have some ideas about cooperation that don't involve occupation. Traoré showed it to Musa, who nearly dropped his tablet. Is this real? People can change, Musa. It's rare, but it happens. Sometimes all it takes is one moment of seeing. Clearly he typed back, I'm willing to listen, but this time let's both bring solutions, not just problems. The summit continued for 3 more days, but everyone knew the real story had already been written. 2 men from different worlds had collided, and in that collision both had discovered something new about themselves and each other.